Welcome back, friends. We are into lecture number 12. We are going to talk about post-colonial Indian diaspora. In the previous two classes, we talked about the phases of Indian diaspora. First, we talked about the pre-colonial diaspora, and then we talked about the colonial diaspora. Now, we are going to talk about the post-colonial diaspora. When we talk about the diasporic fiction, most of the writings belong to post colonial Indian diaspora. But nonetheless, what is important to note is that there has always been a continuity of preoccupation when it comes to Indian diaspora. And as I said in the last class, the experiences, some of the experiences have a sense of continuity in Indian diaspora, whether they belong to pre colonial, colonial, or post colonial. When we talk about the post colonial Indian diaspora, we can safely divide it into three periods: 1947 to 1960s, immediately after the independence of India, then 1960s to 1990s, the middle phase, and then 1990s to present. So 1947 to 1960, the landscape of Indian diaspora began to change after Indian independence, in that we found that lot of Indian professionals made it to other countries in search of better job opportunities or making their lives better. Um, and not only that, during the Indian partition, also a lot of people had to leave the country under some bizarre circumstances, fearing religious persecution, um, uh, not persecution per se, but attacks based on their minority religions or something. And again, there was a sizable population of Anglo Indians that chose to migrate first to Britain, and then when British government stopped taking them, they made it to Australia. So the Indian diaspora that began with 1947, post independence of India, was a different kind of diaspora compared to colonial diaspora, because during the colonial period it was mostly a case of forced migration, um, while during this period we found that it was a migration by choice. So there is certainly a big psychological difference between these two kinds of diasporic people. The people who have been forced to migrate are like those fruits that have been plucked out of season prematurely, and the people who migrate at will or willingly, they are like that ripe fruit. So obviously there will be lot of difference between the quality of these two fruits. So there was lot of difference in the experiences, mental preparedness, or expectations, and level of adaptation between these two kinds of diasporas, colonial and post colonial. During this period, uh, from 1947 to 1960, as I said, mostly people migrated to UK, and there were two significant factors for this migration. First was the shortage of unskilled laborers in UK after the World War, uh, and second was UK's Commonwealth immigration policy that allowed any citizen of a Commonwealth country to live, work, vote, and hold public office in the United Kingdom. So, since the UK policies suited the Indians being part of British Commonwealth, they mostly migrated to Britain. So during this period, we found that the Indian nationals, as Commonwealth citizens, had an unrestricted right to enter the United Kingdom, and that is the reason why um, because of this ease of entry into UK, many people migrated to United Kingdom. At the same time, anti-Indian discrimination started in many African countries, and that resulted in second migration of people of Indian origin to UK. So we know about Idi Amin and many such things happened, and as a result, the people of Indian origin migrated from Africas to UK as well. The term second migration or double migration or twice migration, in fact, refers to those individuals who are first taken to other countries, as I said, to Africas or Caribbeans, and then again they migrated from there to first world countries, mostly to UK during this period, to improve their standard of living, or again to find the circumstances that were much more conducive and safe for their growth and development. Um, for example, in the year 1975, approximately 1,25,000 Indians left Suriname and went to Netherlands. Similarly, Indian diasporas from African subcontinent later migrated to several European countries for the reasons that I just mentioned. Uh, for many, the reasons were economic progress. For many, the reasons were racial, discriminations that they were facing, or the otherness that they were made to face based on their racial identity. So you can look at the Indian diaspora owned firms in the UK, and you will realize that Indians had lot of share um, in real estate and construction. They had 13%, in hospitality 19%, in healthcare 15%, in pharmaceuticals 15%, retail and wholesale 13%. So, this indicates the economic prosperity and success of Indian diaspora in the UK, as per this World Journal of Advanced Research and Reviews report. During the 1960s to 1990s, we found that most of the Indian people migrated to the USA, and the reason for this migration was Hart Celler Act. This made it possible for high skilled immigrants, including Indians, to gain legal permanent residence in the United States. The migrants were able to bring their family members as well. So, the policies of the host countries certainly make a big difference. If the immigrants find that the policies of the host countries are welcoming, they feel like, going to those countries. Of late, uh, we have seen that the situation in the US has been a little precarious for the immigrant population during the current regime, and as a result, people are thinking twice uh, before planning to go to US. So obviously, in the long run, the migration of the people will get hit to USA, because they will find that their policies are a little hostile to them. And so at that point in time, during 1960s and 90s, because of this act, they found that America was more welcoming, and so they thought of going to America. The new law of immigration also triggered migration to Canada at that point in time. In 1968, Canada introduced its point system, which assigns value to qualifications rather than a person's ethnic or national background. And as a result, many qualified Indians, went to Canada, and their numbers went up significantly. During this same period, a new type of diaspora also emerged, which is known as Gulf diaspora, in which we found that the semi skilled and unskilled Indian workers uh, migrated to Gulf countries like UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Bahrain, and others. And for that, we can mention kafala system. It was a system of a sponsorship used in some Middle Eastern countries, including Kuwait, to regulate the employment of migrant workers. Under this system, a migrant worker's legal residence and work permits are tied to an individual employer or sponsor, kafil. So, this sponsor has significant control over the worker's employment and residency status, often leading to situations of exploitation and abuse, as workers may find it challenging to change jobs or leave abusive employers without risking deportation. So, in a way, it was good because a lot of people got jobs and the wages were quite high. So, certainly that, improved their living conditions. They could save a lot of money to send back to their home in India. So, that resulted in remittances, significant remittances to India as well. But there were certain features of this uh, migration that were really very limiting, as the system I just talked about, the kapala system, which again was a kind of, we can say, indenture, in that the sponsors had all the rights on the people they used to employ, and as such the people who signed for them were never allowed to take any other better job, even if it promised them better opportunity, better working conditions, or better wages. The discovery of oil and manpower shortage in the Gulf attracted lot of labor migration, and we have a significant presence in these countries now. And mostly the people who made it to these countries were engineers, doctors, architects, craftsmen, drivers, technical personnel, and also the people who used to take care of shops, household, and livestock. And a lot of people are also engaged in the infrastructural projects like roads and all. So they had lot of need for unskilled and semi skilled and skilled professional workers, and as a result there was a boom in migration to the Gulf countries. So mainly, and again, when we study the migration to the Gulf, we'll find that a lot of people have migrated from the southern states of Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, um, also from Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Gujarat, Goa, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu. But yeah, majority have migrated from Kerala and the southern states to these Gulf countries. It may be because of the ease of traveling as well. So there are four types of migrations in the Gulf countries. First, for business, a lot of people have gone there because the profit margins are good, and there are better business opportunities. There have been professional migrations of educators, doctors, and engineers. There have been migrations for technical works, and then there has been migration in the sector of construction, in domestic sector, in transportation, etc. After 1990s and till the current period, we have seen a shift in the migration of Indians, and we find that the scene has changed, in that the boom in the IT sector has resulted in lot of migration of IT professionals to US and to other countries. So during this period, we have seen that the rise of IT sector and multinational companies have resulted in the migration of Indians to different countries uh, in this sector, especially for better opportunities, good lifestyle, and handsome salary packages. So we have seen, migration of highly skilled professionals like engineers, doctors, scientists, educationists to countries like UK, USA, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. US, UK, and Canadian census data from 2010 estimate that the Indian diaspora grew to 3 million in the US, 1.5 million in the UK, and 1 million in Canada, a 20-fold increase in half a century. So, the US Immigration Act of 1990 introduced H-1B category visa, allowing US businesses to hire foreigners with a minimum of a bachelor's degree in specialty occupations, including doctors, scientists, engineers, and IT specialists. And this opened the floodgates for the Indian engineers, doctors, and such professionals who were hired in good number, and they were in fact the uh, top recipients of H-1B visa uh, to US, and they continue to do that each year. So they are the people who top the list. Later, Australian and New Zealander universities also began to recruit and lure away Indian students from the USA with promises of work permits at the end of their courses, and this gave rise to the migration in these countries. So, of late, we have seen that there is a sizable population of Indian students making it to Australia, New Zealand, and places other than the US as well. So, if we talk about the post colonial diaspora and diasporic experiences and the body of fiction that we are going to talk about when we say the fiction of Indian diaspora, the mostly the fiction written by these diasporic people belonging to post colonial Indian diaspora, features the list of these writers, and it talks about their experiences and complexities and struggles um, which they have overcome in these countries in order to reach to the top or make a significant difference to their living conditions. So, when we talk about the fiction of Indian diaspora, mostly we will be talking about the body of fiction that has been produced by the writers belonging to post colonial diaspora. And remember all these phases of Indian diaspora uh, in order to understand and appreciate the concerns that have been fictionally presented by these fiction writers of Indian diaspora. They are very powerful narratives of the struggles and resilience and the success stories of Indian people abroad, how the people under different circumstances, sometimes hostile circumstances, have crossed the boundaries of their country and have been able to establish themselves to contribute meaningfully. So, dear friends, in the next classes, we'll start talking about the fiction of Indian diaspora. We'll talk about all the important writers who belong to this category, and then we will also discuss theorizing diaspora, all the theoretical premises or lenses that have given us uh, insight into this body of fiction. As a result, we have been able to understand the richness and insight of this body of fiction. So we will also be talking about the theoretical premises and key concepts related to Indian diaspora. Why this is important, friends, is that when we take up a text for discussion, if we are familiar with all the terms and terminology, and if we are familiar with the lenses through which we have to analyze these texts and these narratives, we will be better able to make sense of them and understand the richness of detail and the complexities of diasporic experiences they have so minutely and beautifully detailed in them. So for now, thank you very much, friends. We continue this discussion in the next class. Thank you very much.